The stars had never seemed so close until Jake Morrison stepped onto the bridge of the UES Unity and saw the alien ship waiting for them. The year was 2087, and humanity had just learned to travel faster than light when the message came from deep space. The Zentari Empire wanted to meet Earth's children and welcome them into something called the Galactic Coalition. Jake was chosen to speak for all humans because he was good with words and people trusted him. Captain Lisa Torres stood beside him watching the alien vessel through the big screen. It looked like a crystal flower made of metal and light. The ship was beautiful in a way that made human technology seem rough and ugly. Dr. Ryan Clark pressed his face against another window, trying to see everything at once. He had studied alien life for years, but this was his first time seeing real aliens and their machines. The Zentari ship sent another message asking permission to bring their leader aboard the Unity. Jake told them yes, and soon the airlock was opening. The first alien to step through was tall and thin, with skin that looked like smooth glass. Light seemed to move under its surface like water. It wore robes that changed color as it moved, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like music. The alien said its name was Ambassador Velith, and it came from a world called Velthara. It told Jake that the Zentari Empire had been watching humanity for many years. They were impressed by how quickly humans had learned to build better machines and travel between stars. The Zentari wanted to help humanity join the great family of space peoples. Lieutenant Commander Nick Stevens was also on the bridge taking notes about everything the alien said. Something about the way Velith spoke made Nick feel uneasy, but he could not say what it was. The alien seemed too perfect, and its answers came too quickly as if it had practiced them many times before. Velith told them about the Galactic Coalition and how 40 different species lived together in peace under Zentari guidance. Each species had its own worlds and ships, but they all worked together to make the galaxy a better place. There was no war or hunger or fear because the Zentari helped everyone solve their problems. The Unity followed the Zentari ship to Velthara, and Jake saw his first alien world. Cities made of crystal grew from the ground like trees, and flying machines moved between them without sound. The Zentari people were everywhere, but they all looked the same to human eyes. They moved with grace and spoke in voices like singing. The Zentari leaders met Jake and his team in a great hall made of transparent walls. They could see the whole city below them, and the sky above filled with ships. The Zentari offered humanity membership in their coalition. They would give humans new technology to make better ships and weapons. They would protect human worlds from danger and help them find new planets to live on. In return, humans would follow Zentari guidance about how to live in space. They would trade with other coalition species and share their own discoveries. Most important, they would accept Zentari teachers who would help humans learn the right way to grow as a space people. Jake thought this sounded too good to be true, but the other humans were excited. Dr. Clark wanted to study alien science, and Captain Torres wanted to see the new ship designs. Even Nick Stevens seemed impressed by Zentari promises of peace and prosperity. The Zentari gave them tours of their cities and showed them libraries full of knowledge from across the galaxy. They met other coalition species who all said good things about Zentari leadership. A blue-skinned people called the Ashaki said the Zentari had saved them from destroying themselves with war. Small, furry beings called the Mech said Zentari technology had made their worlds rich and beautiful. But Nick Stevens noticed something strange in the old records. Some species that were mentioned in ancient texts did not seem to exist anymore. When he asked about them, the Zentari said those peoples had chosen to live alone or had joined with other species. They seemed uncomfortable when he kept asking questions. Jake signed the treaty on behalf of all humanity after 3 weeks of talks. The Zentari seemed pleased and promised that human colonies would prosper under their protection. They gave the Unity new engines that could travel much faster and communication devices that worked across vast distances. For 3 years, everything went well. Human colonies grew quickly with Zentari technology, and Earth's scientists made amazing discoveries by studying alien machines. Trade ships carried goods between human worlds and coalition planets. The Zentari teachers were helpful and friendly, and never seemed to ask for too much. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded one of the new colony, ships built with Zentari help. She was taking families to a world called New Geneva when her ship found something floating in space. It was a derelict vessel from a species called the Karathi that the Zentari said had chosen isolation centuries ago. Amy brought the alien ship. Aboard her vessel, and her engineers managed to power up its computer systems. What they found made Amy's blood run cold. The final messages from the Karathi people told a different story about the Zentari Empire. They spoke of lies and promises that turned into chains. They warned of an empire that fed on other species like a parasite until nothing was left but empty worlds and forgotten names. Amy tried to send this information to Earth, but the Zentari communication network blocked her message. Within hours, Zentari ships surrounded her colony vessel. Ambassador Veleth appeared on her screen, but now its musical voice carried a hard edge. The time for pretending was over. Humanity would submit to complete integration into the Zentari Empire or face the same fate as the Karathi and dozens of other species whose names were no longer spoken among the stars. Admiral Zephyr Caney spoke to the Galactic Coalition from the bridge of his flagship, and his words shattered the lies of 3 years. The Zentari Empire was not a peaceful alliance, but a vast machine built to consume other species. Every world in the coalition belonged to the Zentari, and every species served at their pleasure. The 40 peoples Jake Morrison had met were not partners, but prisoners whose chains were made of technology and false promises. Commander Ben Carter received the declaration of war while orbiting Earth in his small defense ship. Around him, the void filled with Zentari vessels that had been hiding just beyond sensor range. The aliens had spent 3 years studying human weapons and ships and movement patterns. They knew exactly how many vessels Earth could field and how quickly human forces could respond to attack. The first battle happened at New Geneva, where Captain Amy Rodriguez had discovered the truth. Colonel Kate Wilson commanded the colony's small defense force when the Zentari fleet arrived. She had 12 fighters and 100 soldiers against a force that could have conquered a solar system. The Zentari sent a message demanding immediate surrender and promising merciful treatment for those who obeyed. Kate Wilson sent back a message that would be remembered across the galaxy. She told the Zentari that humans did not know how to surrender and invited them to come down and try to take the colony by force. The alien commander was confused by this response. Every other species had yielded when faced with overwhelming odds. Fighting when victory was impossible made no sense. The Zentari attacked expecting the humans to break after the first assault. Instead, they found soldiers who fought harder when things got worse. Kate Wilson's people used every building and street as a weapon. They turned the colony's machinery into bombs, and its communication network into a way to coordinate attacks. When Zentari troops landed, they faced an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. For 6 days, the battle raged, and each day the Zentari lost more ships and soldiers. The humans used tactics that seemed insane to alien minds. They would attack superior forces, and when those attacks failed, they would attack again from a different direction. They learned from every defeat and used each lesson to fight better in the next engagement. The Zentari had energy weapons that could melt steel and armor that could stop any human projectile. But the humans adapted faster than the aliens could respond. They built new weapons from colony equipment and found ways to turn Zentari technology against its makers. By the 4th day, human fighters were using captured alien weapons, and by the 6th day, they were modifying those weapons to work even better. When New Geneva finally fell, more than half the Zentari assault force was gone. The alien commander sent reports back to his superiors that made no sense to them. How could a small human colony destroy so many ships and kill so many trained soldiers? The humans had inferior weapons and no hope of victory, but they had fought, as if they expected to win. News of the battle reached Earth, and every human colony through channels the Zentari could not block. Admiral Grace Murphy took command of what remained of Earth's space fleet, while General Paul Henderson organized ground forces. They knew they could not match Zentari technology or numbers, but Kate Wilson had shown them something important. Humans did not have to win every battle to win the war. Dr. Helen Brooks studied the reports from New Geneva and realized why the Zentari were confused. Every other species they had conquered fought to achieve specific goals, like protecting their families or saving their worlds. When those goals became impossible, they stopped fighting. But humans fought for different reasons. They fought because fighting was what humans did when faced with danger. The Zentari increased their forces and attacked more human colonies. Each battle followed the same pattern. The aliens expected quick victory and found instead enemies who refused to accept defeat. Human defenders learned new tactics during each engagement and shared those lessons with other colonies through hidden communication networks. Captain Alex Turner commanded a small fleet of converted merchant ships and began attacking Zentari supply lines. His forces were too weak to face enemy warships directly, so they struck at targets the aliens thought were safe. Cargo vessels and fuel depots and communication stations became battlegrounds where humans learned to fight in space. The Zentari found themselves dealing with something they had never faced before. Other species became predictable once their patterns were understood, but humans kept changing. Every time the aliens developed new tactics to counter human strategies, the humans would develop newer strategies that made the old tactics useless. On the planet, New Harmony. Sergeant Danny Brooks led resistance fighters against Zentari occupation forces. The aliens controlled the major cities, but humans owned the wilderness and the industrial areas. They turned factories into weapons plants and civilian networks into intelligence systems. The Zentari discovered that conquering human worlds was easier than holding them. 2 years into the war, the Zentari Empire controlled most human colonies, but they were paying a price no one had expected. Every world required a garrison, and every garrison was under constant attack. The humans would not accept occupation, and they would not stop learning better ways to fight. Each month brought new weapons and tactics that forced the Zentari to commit more resources to maintaining control. Dr. Maya Foster worked in a hidden laboratory trying to understand captured Zentari technology. She discovered that alien machines were designed to be perfect from the beginning. They worked exactly as intended and never needed to be improved. Human machines were different. They were built to be modified and upgraded and changed to meet new needs. This difference became the key to human survival. While Zentari forces used the same weapons and tactics their species had perfected over centuries, human forces improved every day. Each battle taught them something new, and each lesson made them more dangerous opponents. The war was spreading across 50 star systems, and humanity was losing ground everywhere, but they were also learning faster than any species in galactic history. The Zentari had awakened something they did not understand and could not control. They had turned humans into warriors, and warriors were what humans were meant to be. Captain Alex Turner watched his converted cargo ship dive through the asteroid field, while Zentari cruisers gave chase. 2 years of running battles had taught him that humans could not win stand-up fights against alien technology, but they could win by refusing to fight fair. His ship carried weapons built from scavenged parts and armor made from asteroid metal. It looked like junk, but it could outrun and outfight vessels that cost the Zentari Empire millions of credits to build. The war had spread across 50 star systems, and humanity was losing every major battle but winning something more important. Every defeat taught them lessons that made future victories possible. The Zentari controlled most human colonies, But they were learning that controlling human territory was different from controlling humans. On New Harmony, Sergeant Danny Brooks led his resistance fighters through the ruins of what used to be the capital city. The Zentari had bombed it into rubble when they could not root out the human defenders. Now that rubble was a fortress where every broken building hid weapons and every tunnel carried supplies to fighters who struck without warning and vanished before the aliens could respond. Danny's people had learned to use the planet's industrial base as a weapon. Factory machines that once made cars and computers now produced explosives and communication devices. The Zentari tried to destroy these facilities, but humans rebuilt them faster than aliens could find them. Underground workshops powered by geothermal taps produced equipment that would have impressed Earth's best engineers. Dr. Maya Foster worked in one of those hidden workshops trying to solve the puzzle of Zentari technology. After 2 years of study, she had learned something important about alien machines. They were built to work perfectly, but they could not adapt to new situations. Human machines were different. They were designed to be modified and improved and rebuilt to meet changing needs. This discovery led to the first human weapons that could match Zentari equipment. Maya's adaptive systems learned from each battle and modified themselves to be more effective against alien defenses. A gun that fired solid projectiles in the morning might shoot energy beams by evening if that worked better against enemy armor. The breakthrough came when Maya realized that human creativity was the real weapon. Zentari technology was perfect, but it was also static. Human technology was imperfect, but it evolved. Every human engineer who studied a captured alien device found ways to make it work better. Every soldier who used those devices in combat discovered new applications that their creators had never imagined. Commander Tony Shaw proved this during his raid on a Zentari research station. His team used modified human equipment to break through alien security systems that should have been impenetrable. The station's defenders had prepared for attacks using known technology, but Shaw's weapons behaved in ways that alien computers could not predict or counter. Inside the station, Shaw found something more valuable than weapons or ships. He discovered Zentari tactical databases that revealed their greatest weakness. The aliens had conquered 40 species using the same basic strategy. They studied their enemies, then applied overwhelming force at critical points. It worked because most species followed predictable patterns even when facing extinction. But humans were different. They changed their patterns faster than the Zentari could study them. Every time the aliens thought they understood human tactics, humans would develop new ones. Shaw's data showed that Zentari military computers were starting to malfunction because they could not process the constant changes in human behavior. Admiral Grace Murphy used this information to plan Operation Prometheus. She would attack 3 Zentari strongholds at the same time, using forces that appeared to have no chance of success. The alien defenders would expect her to use standard human tactics and would prepare to counter those tactics. Instead, she would do something no rational military commander would attempt. The operation looked like a disaster. Human forces attacked heavily defended positions with insufficient numbers and inadequate equipment. They suffered terrible casualties and achieved no apparent strategic gains. Zentari commanders congratulated themselves on finally teaching the humans a lesson about the futility of resistance. But Operation Prometheus was not designed to capture territory or destroy enemy forces. It was designed to test Zentari responses under carefully controlled conditions. Each human attack probed different aspects of alien defenses and recorded how the enemy reacted. The casualties were real, but the intelligence gathered was priceless. Murphy's teams learned exactly how long it took Zentari forces to respond to different threats. They mapped alien communication networks and identified key command nodes. They discovered which enemy weapons were most effective against human equipment and which human weapons worked best against alien armor. Most important, they learned that the Zentari were becoming frustrated. The aliens had expected human resistance to collapse after suffering massive losses. Instead, humans seemed to be learning from their defeats and becoming more dangerous. This pattern made no sense to minds that had spent centuries conquering predictable enemies. The war was changing both species, but humanity's transformation was more dramatic. Human colonies that survived Zentari attacks were no longer the peaceful settlements they had been before the war. They were fortresses where children learned to shoot before they learned to read, and every adult was a soldier ready to fight at any moment. Captain Steve Walker commanded a unit of these new human warriors during the defense of Port Royal Colony. His soldiers had been fighting for 2 years, and they moved like machines built for war. They could predict enemy tactics and counter them before alien commanders finished giving orders. They used weapons that adapted to battlefield conditions and tactics that changed faster than the enemy could respond. The battle for Port Royal lasted 3 weeks and became a legend among human forces. Walker's people faced odds of 10 to 1, but they held their ground through superior adaptation and unbreakable determination. By the end of the battle, they were using Zentari weapons better than the aliens who built them and employing tactics that turned enemy advantages into human victories. The Zentari Empire was beginning to face something it had never encountered before. Other coalition species were watching the human war and asking questions about Zentari invincibility. If humans could resist the Empire's might, then perhaps other species could do the same. Rebellions began spreading to worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. 5 years of war had turned humanity into something new. They were no longer explorers seeking peaceful contact with alien civilizations. They were warriors who thrived on conflict and grew stronger with each battle. The Zentari had created their own worst nightmare, and it was learning to hunt them. Captain Steve Walker led his shock troops through the smoking ruins of Zentari Base 7 and marveled at how easy the assault had been. 5 years ago, his people would have needed overwhelming numbers to take a fortified position like this. Now, his 100 soldiers had destroyed a garrison of 1,000 aliens using weapons that learned during combat and tactics that evolved faster than enemy computers could track them. The secret was what human military scientists called adaptive aggression. Walker's forces modified their strategies in real time as battles developed. When Zentari defenders deployed energy shields, his weapons automatically switched to kinetic projectiles. When aliens tried to jam human communications, his people used hand signals that confused enemy pattern recognition systems. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Turner exemplified this new breed of human warrior. Her unit had fought in 20 major battles without suffering a single defeat. They achieved victory not through superior numbers or better technology, but through relentless adaptation that broke enemy morale. Zentari soldiers had begun surrendering. When they saw her forces approaching because fighting humans had become a form of slow suicide. Dr. Maya Foster's adaptive technology had evolved far beyond her original designs. Human weapons now modified themselves during combat without conscious direction from their users. Armor changed its properties to counter incoming attacks, and ships reconfigured their systems to match battlefield conditions. The technology was becoming almost alive in its ability to learn and grow. But the real change was in the humans themselves. Dr. Ryan Clark had been studying combat veterans, and his findings disturbed him. 5 years of constant warfare had begun altering human physiology. Reaction times had improved by 30%. Pattern recognition abilities had doubled. Stress tolerance had increased to levels that should have been impossible. The humans were evolving into a warrior species at a rate that violated everything scientists knew about adaptation. Children born during the war showed enhanced reflexes and improved tactical thinking. Adults who survived multiple battles displayed changes in brain structure that made them better at processing combat information and making split-second decisions. Admiral Grace Murphy commanded the defense of Earth as Admiral Zephyr Caney assembled the largest fleet in Zentari history. The alien commander had decided that humanity's homeworld must fall to break human resistance once and for all. He brought 3,000 ships carrying weapons that could crack planets and soldiers trained in the art of genocide. But Earth was no longer the peaceful world the Zentari had first contacted. The entire solar system had been turned into a fortress during 5 years of desperate preparation. Hidden bases on asteroids and moons housed fleets of ships built with adaptive technology. Defense platforms that looked like space debris waited to reveal weapon systems that learned from every shot fired. General Paul Henderson coordinated ground defenses that turned every city into a killing field and every civilian into a potential soldier. The Zentari expected to face desperate defenders making a final stand. Instead, they found an entire population that had been transformed by years of war into something that thrived on conflict and grew stronger under pressure. The Battle of Earth began when Kaney's fleet emerged from hyperspace expecting to find a broken world defended by the remnants of human resistance. Instead, they faced a coordinated defense system that had spent 5 years learning how to kill Zentari more efficiently than any force in galactic history. Human defenders did not just fight back against the invasion, they hunted the invaders with precision that terrified alien crews. Zentari ships found themselves facing enemies that predicted their movements and countered their tactics before alien commanders could give orders. Every engagement became a lesson in human adaptation that made the next battle more difficult for the aliens. Commander Jake Morrison had traded his diplomat's robes for a general's uniform and now coordinated strikes against Zentari command ships. His forces used tactics that would have been considered impossible 5 years earlier. They appeared where enemy sensors said they could not be and struck at targets that should have been protected by impenetrable defenses. The battle lasted 3 months and became known throughout the galaxy as the Graveyard of Empires. Zentari, forces that had conquered dozens of worlds, found themselves being systematically destroyed by defenders who refused to follow the rules of conventional warfare. Human tactics evolved during the battle itself as soldiers learned from every exchange of fire and adapted to counter new alien strategies. Admiral Kaney watched his grand fleet being torn apart by forces he could not understand or predict. Zentari. Tactical computers crashed trying to process human behavior that changed faster than their programs could analyze. Energy weapons that had never failed before became useless against armor that learned from each hit and modified itself to resist. Damage. By the end of the first month, Kaney had lost a third of his fleet and gained nothing. Human defenses grew stronger with each attack, as adaptive systems incorporated lessons learned from fighting the Empire's best weapons. Zentari soldiers began refusing orders to assault human positions because doing so had become synonymous with death. The turning point came when human forces stopped defending and started attacking. Captain Alex Turner led raids that struck deep into Zentari formations, using ships that had learned to mimic enemy sensor signatures. His forces would appear as friendly vessels on alien scanners, then reveal their true nature only when their weapons were already firing. Lieutenant Commander Nick Stevens commanded boarding parties that captured Zentari vessels and turned them against their former owners. Human engineers could modify alien technology faster than its creators could develop. Countermeasures. Ships that had been built to fight humans were soon being used to hunt their own kind with terrifying efficiency. The final assault came when Admiral Murphy launched every ship Earth could field in a coordinated strike that targeted Kaney's flagship. The Zentari commander found himself surrounded by forces that moved like a single organism and fought with a unity that made resistance impossible. His perfect formation broke apart under attacks that came from every direction at once. When Admiral Kaney's flagship exploded, the remaining Zentari forces lost their will to fight. They had come to destroy humanity's homeworld, and instead watched their greatest fleet being dismantled by defenders who treated war like an art form. The survivors fled back to Zentari space carrying reports that would change the galaxy forever. Earth had held, and humanity had proven something that shattered the foundations of galactic civilization. The Zentari Empire was not invincible, and their victims did not have to accept defeat. Other species began to ask themselves why they had submitted. to alien rule when resistance might have been possible all along. Admiral Lisa Torres watched Zentari colonies burn from the bridge of her flagship and felt nothing but satisfaction. The destruction of Admiral Kaney's grand fleet had marked the end of human defense and the beginning of human conquest. Her forces were no longer fighting to survive, but fighting to grow stronger through the act of fighting itself. Every battle taught them new lessons, and every victory made them hunger for greater challenges. The roles had completely reversed across the galaxy. Zentari forces that had once attacked human worlds with overwhelming confidence now found themselves desperately defending territory against enemies who seemed to appear from nowhere and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Human fleets moved through space like hunting packs following the scent of prey. Commander Jake Morrison had developed what military historians would later call the Cascade Protocol. Instead of simply defeating Zentari forces' human fleets systematically, dismantled their infrastructure while offering liberation to enslaved species. This transformed conquest into revolution as dozens of worlds rose against their former masters. The Ashaki were the first to join humanity's cause. The blue-skinned people who had once praised Zentari leadership now revealed the truth about their supposed rescue from self-destruction. The aliens had engineered the wars that nearly destroyed Ashaki civilization, then offered salvation in exchange for eternal servitude. Human forces helped them reclaim their independence, and their gratitude came in the form of advanced shield technology that made human ships nearly invulnerable. Captain Amy Rodriguez led the liberation of mech worlds where the small, furry beings had been turned into slave laborers for Zentari industrial projects. The aliens had strip-mined entire planets while their former inhabitants worked in conditions that killed thousands every day. Amy's forces freed the survivors and learned that mech engineering skills could improve human weapons in ways their creators had never imagined. The war was spreading across the galaxy, but it was no longer the same conflict that had begun with Zentari deception. Humanity had discovered something that changed their entire philosophy about existence. Conflict was not a problem to be solved, but an opportunity for growth. Peace was not the absence of war, but the presence of worthy opponents who forced continuous improvement. General Kate Wilson commanded all human ground forces, and her troops had become legends among liberation movements throughout known space. They did not just defeat Zentari garrisons, but systematically studied alien tactical doctrine and incorporated useful elements into their own constantly evolving strategies. Every captured base became a laboratory where humans learned new ways to fight more effectively. Dr. Ryan Clark's research into human evolution had produced disturbing results that military leaders chose to ignore. The species was changing at a rate that violated every scientific law about adaptation. Children born during the war displayed reflexes and analytical abilities that surpassed their parents. Adults who survived multiple battles showed brain modifications that made them better at processing combat data and making tactical decisions. Humanity was becoming something new, and the transformation was accelerating. Soldiers who had fought for 6 years could predict enemy movements with accuracy that seemed supernatural. They could modify tactics during battle faster than alien computers could track changes. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to need conflict, the way other species needed food or water. The liberation of Karathi Prime became a symbol of human justice and a demonstration of how far the species had evolved. Captain Nick Stevens led the assault that freed survivors of the supposedly extinct people from Zentari prison camps. The grateful Karathi shared technologies that boosted human capabilities even further and revealed the true scope of alien crimes. Across the galaxy, Commander Ben Carter discovered evidence that the Zentari Empire had destroyed over 100 species during its rise to power. Entire civilizations had been erased from history after failing to submit to alien rule. Their worlds had been stripped of resources and their populations reduced to slavery before being allowed to die out through deliberate neglect. This knowledge fueled human anger and gave their forces a moral justification for the increasingly brutal tactics they employed against Zentari defenders. The aliens had revealed themselves to be genocidal parasites who deserved no mercy. Every liberated world provided new evidence of systematic oppression and deliberate extinction policies that made human retaliation seem not just justified, but necessary. As human forces advanced toward the Zentari homeworld of Velthara Other, galactic powers took notice of this new force that had shattered the established order. Ancient civilizations that had remained neutral during the war began sending observers to study human methods and determine whether this upstart species represented a threat or an opportunity. The hegemony of eternal stars was a confederation of machine intelligences that had watched organic species rise and fall for millions of years. Their representatives arrived at human space stations and requested meetings with military leaders. They wanted to understand how biological entities had achieved such rapid tactical evolution without cybernetic enhancement. Admiral Torres met with hegemony representatives and explained that humanity's secret was not technology, but philosophy. Other species fought to achieve specific goals like territory or resources or security. Humans fought to become better at fighting. Every battle was an opportunity to learn and grow, and the pursuit of improvement had become more important than any individual victory. The machine minds found this concept fascinating and disturbing. They had assumed that biological intelligence was limited by evolutionary constraints, but humans seemed to be transcending those limits through conscious choice. The species was deliberately evolving itself into something that thrived on conflict and grew stronger through adversity. Meanwhile, the Zentari Empire was collapsing as rebellion spread to worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. The prolonged human resistance had revealed that the aliens were not invincible gods, but fallible beings who could be defeated by determination and superior adaptation. Species that had submitted without resistance now wondered what might have been possible if they had chosen to fight. The final offensive began when Admiral Murphy launched the first human fleet to enter Zentari home space. Her forces comprised veterans of 6 years of continuous warfare supported by weapons and tactics that had been refined through thousands of battles. They were no longer fighting to survive or even to win, but to prove that humanity had become the galaxy's dominant predator. The advance toward Velthara was not a campaign, but a demonstration. Human forces swept aside Zentari defenses that had protected the core worlds for millennia. Every engagement reinforced the new reality that the hunters had become the hunted, and the prey was learning what it meant to face an enemy that grew stronger through the act of fighting itself. The crystal cities of Velthara burned under human orbital bombardment as Admiral Lisa Torres watched the end of an empire that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. The final assault on the Zentari homeworld had become less a battle than a demonstration of what humanity had become during 8 years of continuous warfare. The beings who had once deceived Earth's diplomats now cowered in underground shelters while their perfect civilization crumbled around them. Admiral Zephyr Kane sent his final transmission from the ruins of the Imperial Palace. The Zentari Empire formally surrendered and offered to share their vast libraries of knowledge in exchange for mercy. The alien commander who had once threatened to exterminate humanity now begged for the chance to serve their former victims. His voice carried none of the musical quality that had once made Zentari speech so beautiful to human ears. General Paul Henderson accepted the surrender, but on terms that reflected what humanity had learned during 8 years of adaptive warfare. The Zentari Empire would be dissolved and its member species granted independence. The aliens themselves would be put on trial for crimes against galactic civilization. Most important, their military technology would be studied and incorporated into human systems that were already surpassing their creators. The victory celebration on Earth lasted for days, but the mood was not one of relief or joy. Humanity had discovered something during the war that changed their fundamental nature. They had become addicted to the process of improvement through conflict, and peace felt like stagnation. Children who had grown up during the fighting asked their parents when the next war would begin. Dr. Maya Foster presented her final report on human evolution to leaders who barely recognized their own species. 8 years of constant adaptation had transformed humanity into something that thrived on challenge and grew stronger under pressure. Brain scans showed modifications that enhanced pattern recognition and tactical thinking. Physical changes had improved reflexes and stress tolerance beyond normal biological limits. The most significant change was psychological. Humans no longer fought to achieve specific goals, but to perfect the art of fighting itself. Victory was not an end, but a beginning that led to seeking greater challenges. The species had become a living weapon that sharpened itself through use and grew more dangerous with each battle won. Commander Ben Carter explained this transformation to representatives from across the galaxy who had come to witness the birth of a new galactic power. Humanity would not seek conquest in the traditional sense, but would offer membership in something called the Adaptive Coalition. Species that joined would engage in regulated conflicts designed to drive technological and social evolution for all participants. The concept horrified some observers and fascinated others. The idea of deliberate warfare as a tool for improvement went against everything most civilizations believed about progress and civilization. But human results spoke for themselves. In 8 years, they had evolved from naive newcomers to the galaxy's most formidable warriors through the simple expedient of never accepting defeat as final. Captain Amy Rodriguez commanded humanity's first deep space exploration fleet as it prepared to leave known space in search of new challenges. Her mission was to find civilizations that could provide the kind of opposition that would force continued human growth. The galaxy they were leaving behind no longer offered adequate resistance to drive further evolution. The Karathi gladly joined the Adaptive Coalition and shared technologies that enhanced human capabilities even further. Their bitter experience with Zentari oppression had taught them the value of strength through struggle. Other liberated species followed their example and began adopting human methods of continuous improvement through controlled conflict. Admiral Grace Murphy oversaw the establishment of coalition training centers where member species learned human techniques for rapid adaptation. The method seemed insane to minds accustomed to traditional warfare, but the results were undeniable. Forces trained by humans could defeat enemies that outnumbered them 10-1 through superior flexibility and faster learning. The machine intelligences of the hegemony requested permanent observers in human space to study this biological phenomenon that violated their understanding of evolutionary limits. They wanted to learn how organic minds could achieve adaptation rates that rivaled cybernetic enhancement. Some of their number began experimenting with incorporating human methods into their own strategic planning. 1 year after victory, Earth's children attended schools that looked more like military academies than educational institutions. They learned mathematics through tactical problems and studied history by analyzing famous battles. Art classes focused on camouflage design and literature courses examined propaganda techniques. The entire species had embraced war as the fundamental driver of progress. Dr. Helen Brooks warned that humanity was losing something essential in their transformation into perfect warriors. The capacity for peaceful cooperation and artistic expression was being overwhelmed by an obsession with conflict and improvement. But her concerns were dismissed by leaders who pointed to human achievements that would have been impossible without their warrior transformation. The trial of Zentari leaders became a showcase for human justice that impressed other species with its thoroughness and fairness. The aliens were not executed, but sentenced to serve the coalition by sharing their knowledge and helping to identify other oppressive civilizations that needed liberation. Even in defeat, they would contribute to human growth through the information they provided. General Kate Wilson addressed the first coalition assembly and explained humanity's new mission to the galaxy. They would not impose their system on unwilling, participants, but would offer it to any species brave enough to embrace growth through struggle. Those who chose comfort over challenge would be left alone to stagnate in their peaceful isolation. The galaxy now faced a new reality where the most advanced civilization was one that deliberately sought conflict as a tool for advancement. Other species had to decide whether to join humanity's endless quest for improvement or risk being left behind as the universe evolved around them. The choice was theirs, but the consequences would shape the future of all life in known space. Captain Steve Walker led the final human patrol through former Zentari territory and marveled at how quickly the galaxy was changing. Liberated worlds were already adopting coalition methods, and their rapid progress was inspiring other species to reconsider their own approaches to civilization. Humanity had not just won a war, but had introduced a new concept of existence based on eternal striving for perfection through adversity. The war that was meant to destroy humanity had instead forged them into something unprecedented in galactic history. They were no longer just another species struggling for survival, but had become the universe's evolutionary engine. Their example showed that any civilization could transcend its limitations by embracing challenge and growing stronger through the very act of fighting to become better than they were before.